Quran itself means recitation. The way of reciting Quran is known as tartil. For example, listen to the voice of this Quran reciter.
وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَا بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ قالوا أتحدثونهم بما فتح الله عليكم ليحاجوكم به عند ربكم أفلا تعقلون.
Quran was fully transmitted from time of Prophet Muhammad till now by this way of oral recitation. And this way is much better than writing or copying, because errors and mistakes may result from writing or copying, and these copying errors are known as scribal errors. So oral recitation from memory is much better than copying. For example, if you perfectly memorized a poem called Dirge by William Shakespeare, and then I gave you two options. Option 1, to copy this poem or write it on paper. Option 2, to orally recite the poem which you perfectly memorized. The probability of you doing mistakes while orally reciting the poem is much lower than the probability of mistakes you will do while copying or writing it. Because the movements of your eyes and hand will not always be perfect. And this causes scribal errors. In an article by University of Alberta, they provided list of scribal errors and their reasons. That is why Uthman required at least 2 witnesses for every Quran verse before copying it. Also, you can make typing errors while writing a Facebook or YouTube comment. That is why we always double check and edit our comments before posting them. So the primary source of Quran transmission is the oral recitation, not the manuscripts. And this oral recitation is memorized by millions of Muslims, even children, who can recite Quran entirely in front of you without even looking at a written text.
قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ إِلَى عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ.
If those Quran reciters wrote or copied the Quranic text without reciting it, they will surely make mistakes. But if they recite Quran orally from their perfect memorization, they will probably never do a single mistake. And Allah said that He made Quran easy for remembrance. Memorizing Quran is easy. This is an observable proven fact. Quran is the only book in world which is being memorized from cover to cover by millions. Also, for example, if a poet wrote a certain poetry which was then fully memorized by thousands of people, and then we discovered an old paper written by an unknown person, and this paper contains some differences from the poetry which was orally memorized by thousands. Should we then change the original poetry just because we found an old paper written by an unknown person who obviously made mistakes? This will not make any sense. Same cases with Quran. We will not change it just because of a manuscript written by unknown scribe. Unlike Christians, who are constantly changing the so-called Holy Bible because of anonymous manuscripts. So the primary source of Quran preservation is from authentic oral transmissions which are supported by unbreakable chain of narrators, and we have complete knowledge about each and everyone who is in the chain of narrators. For example, this is chain of narrators of Hafs recitation. So we don't take Quran from unknown sources, but rather we take it from well-known Quran reciters who were experts in memorizing the recitation of Quran. And our religion is based on a method called isnad. An authentic isnad means chain of transmission which could be traced back to its original source. We don't accept any information without a reliable isnad. And in order for an isnad to be fully reliable, the narrators should be trustworthy and well known, and the chain should be connected, which means narrators met or learned from each other. So the standards applied in Islam is different from Christianity and all other religions. Christians don't even know who are the authors of the Bible and they don't care.
Book in the New Testament that addresses the subject.
Do we know who wrote the book of Hebrews?
No, we do not.
Unlike all other religions, Islam is the only religion which requires authenticity of the source of information before accepting it. If, for example, the Sana manuscript was presented to a great Muslim scholar like Al-Bukhari, first thing he will ask is who wrote it, and when did he write it, and who was his teacher? That's why the early Muslim scholar Muhammad bin Sirin said, "Indeed this knowledge is faith, so carefully consider from whom you take your faith." All other religions don't apply these standards. Followers of other religions don't even know from whom they got their sources and how. So don't bring me a manuscript which we don't know who wrote it and say that it is different from Quran. Because this criteria is not even applied in Islam. The primary source of Quran transmission is the oral memorized recitation. Ibn Taymiyyah, who was a scholar in the 13th century, said, "The transmission of Quran depends on memorization of hearts, i.e. oral memorization, not on copies." He also says, "And Quran is still preserved in the chests with a mutawatir transmission, i.e. transmission by multitude of reciters." Even if someone intended to change something in the copies of Quran and then presented it to Muslim children, they will know that he changed the copy of Quran due to their memorization of Quran. Ibn al-Jazari, who was a scholar in the 14th century, also says, "Transmission of Quran depends on the preservation in hearts and chests, i.e. oral memorization, not on writing the copies." So all Muslim scholars agree that the transmitted well-known oral recitations from the Prophet are the main source for Quran, not the written copies or manuscripts. And Allah said that Quran is preserved in the chests of believers, and He said that Quran can't be washed away with water. Which means that Quran is in the hearts of believers, not in papers or manuscripts which can be washed away. So even if Abdullah Samir and his likes brought hundreds of thousands of manuscripts which doesn't agree with Quran, it means nothing for us Muslims. Because we don't even consider these manuscripts which were written by unknown scribes as a valid source for transmission of Quran. Abdullah Samir should try making this argument with Christians who blindly accept the Bible manuscripts without knowing who wrote them. So if Abdullah Samir wants to have problem with transmission of Quran, he should have problems with the orally transmitted recitations of Quran, not on the current manuscripts. And if he have problem with the Qiraat, we already know that the Qiraat are part of Quran revelation. Because Prophet Muhammad himself said this. He said, "The Quran has been revealed in 7 different ways, so recite it in the way that is easier for you." Allah has commanded you to make your community read the Quran in 7 modes, in whichever mode they read, that will be correct. And Ibn al-Jazari, who was scholar in the 14th century, said, "Every reading which agrees with Arabic and with one of the Uthmanic codex and it have authentic chain of transmission, then it is a correct reading which must not be rejected and not permissible to deny. And it is part of the 7 modes which Quran have been revealed." So we already know by evidence that the Qiraat are part of the Quran revelation. We have no problem with that. So in conclusion, we don't depend on any of the current manuscripts which were written by unknown scribes. But we depend on the authentic oral recitations which could be traced back to Prophet Muhammad himself. The Sana manuscript means nothing to us in terms of Quran transmission. And it have been proven that the manuscript tradition causes scribal errors. And the best example of scribal errors is the Bible. The Bible manuscripts are filled with tons of mistakes. Even the most careful scribe could make mistakes. However careful the scribe might be, it was almost impossible in copying a long and difficult manuscript to prevent the occurrence of errors. Yet Christians depended on this flawed method. That's why the Bible is filled with thousands of scribal mistakes. Even in printed Bibles, whose proofs have been carefully examined and re-examined, these mistakes creep in. There are more than 200,000 scribal mistakes in the Bible manuscripts. And there are even intentional changes made by scribes of Bible manuscripts. That's why Christian scholars have to revise the Bible over and over again. And famous Bible manuscript scholars like Kurt Aland and Bruce Metzger are revising the Bible in a book called UBS Greek New Testament, which have 5 editions till now. And in each edition, they are making changes to the Bible based on manuscripts. For example, they made 500 changes from the first to third edition. And the editors of the UBS gave grades for every New Testament verse. These grades are based on how certain they are that the verse resembles the original text. 8.7% of the New Testament got grade A. 32.3% got B, 48.6% got C, 10.4% got D. So according to manuscript scholars of the Bible, about 50% of the New Testament is doubtful. That is because Christians have depended on a flawed method while transmitting the biblical text, while we Muslims had the best transmission method in history. So we should expect more and more Bible versions to come soon. Now coming to the second point. Is Sana manuscript a reliable source to criticize Quran with? Abdullah Samir's main argument is that the lower text of Sana manuscript was a perfect copy of Quran, which means that the scribe was perfectly and carefully copying the Quran according to him. He claims that the scribe of Sana manuscript didn't make mistakes while copying Quran.
Now ask yourself, all of these differences that we're about to show you, are these all mistakes?
And he claims that the Sana manuscript was an older version of Quran which was later changed.
I believe that this surviving text that was erased, that we were able to get a hold of, is actually an older copy of the Quran before Uthman was able to standardize it.
However, Abdullah Samir didn't provide a single shred of evidence for his baseless claims. Now I will prove with solid evidences that the scribe of Sana manuscript did make mistakes while writing the manuscript. And thus Abdullah Samir's argument will be destroyed. We will see how the scribe of Sana manuscript himself admitted that he made mistakes while writing the manuscript. His mistakes can be explained. We can give reasons for his mistakes. In 2012, 2 scholars named Sadeghi and Godazi published a study regarding the lower text of Sana manuscript. In this study, they published the lower text of Sana manuscript. And they showed how the scribe was confused and made many mistakes which are not part of the Quran. Let's see some examples of these mistakes. In Quran 552, in this space, the scribe forgot to write these words, which means Allah will. And as we can see, without these 2 words, the sentence is incomplete and doesn't make sense. So here the scribe proved that he have bad memory and was being careless. And in this case, the scribe have initially forgotten a word. And then he added it after noticing that he forgot. The word which he initially forgot is Rahim, which means merciful. And the evidence is that he wrote part of the word Rahim without the first letter of the word, which is R. But he attached part of the word to the R letter of the previous word.